welcome, Hoosier fans, to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call, as tonight your Indiana Hoosiers knock off the first-place team in the Big Ten, the number 11-ranked Michigan State Spartans, by a final score of 67-63. Another IU-Michigan State game goes down to the wire, and the Hoosiers find a way to get it done. The win puts Indiana at 15-4 overall on the season, 5-3 in conference play, and it's Indiana's third straight victory over the Spartans, a hard-fought, tough battle that Indiana jumped out to and really controlled early. Michigan State was able to battle back and take a lead in the second half, but Indiana regained control late, made the plays that they needed to make down the stretch to get the win. And we're going to talk about it all on this edition of the Assembly Call IU Postgame Show. I am your host, Jerod Morris. I'm here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and let's start this show the way that we start every show, and that is with our Hoosier Proud banner moment. And obviously, you could give this to Trayce Jackson-Davis for his block there at the end of the game, which, getting switched on to Cassius Winston and being able to recover and make that block shot. But of course,
holding his own, right?
He did. It helped that Xavier Tillman missed a little follow bunny. But for tonight's banner moment, I'm going back just a little bit earlier in that second half. With 2 minutes and 30 seconds to go, the game was tied at 60-60. And I thought to myself, you know what? This game is going to be won or lost on the glass, because you look at previous IU Michigan State games, they're almost always won late with key rebounds. Who can get the tough rebounds late? And tonight, it was Indiana, and specifically, it was Joey Brunk, who right after that point had two huge rebounds for Indiana. First, he rebounded Cassius Winston's miss on a three in transition, and then coming down on the next possession, he tapped out Trayce Jackson-Davis's miss, which saved a possession for Indiana. That led to Al Durham's three-pointer, which put Indiana up 63-60 and really gave Indiana the final control of the game kind of going down the stretch. And don't forget, a possession or two later, he grabbed Rob's shot. Rob drove down the left baseline, got a shot blocked. Joey grabbed that and scored. That put Indiana up 65-62. It was toughness. It was presence of mind. It was, making plays as a rebounder in a game that demanded it. It is what Joey Brunk has been giving this Indiana team all season long. He led Indiana in scoring with 14 points. He led Indiana in rebounding with 6 rebounds, and he was there at the end to make the plays in winning time when Indiana needed them. Just yet another huge game for Joey Brunk, showing the leadership, showing the playmaking in the post that has made him such a valuable part of this Indiana roster. All right, our banner moment tonight, as always, brought to you by our friends at Home Field Apparel, a company that was founded by an IU grad and that remains based in Indianapolis. And, there are many, many reasons why you should go to homefieldapparel.com, why you should support them. And, the number one reason, it's not about supporting them or they're an Indiana-based, based brand, any of that stuff. It's that their gear is just awesome. It's incredibly comfortable. I mean, whether you go with the crew neck sweater, the soft hoodie, the tri-blend hoodie, the T-shirts, the long-sleeve tees, whatever you get, it's just going to make your body feel good wearing their material because it feels so good, and it maintains that comfort even after you wash it. And then the logos that are on the outside of it, I mean, they're just impeccable. They have some of the greatest classic Indiana logos that you're going to find anywhere, from the Script Indiana to the Bison logo, so many other old football logos that they brought out during the season, a bunch of old basketball-inspired logos, the Christian Watford designs that they have celebrating the Watt shot. They have something for every IU fan at homefieldapparel.com. That's why you need to go there, shop for yourself, shop for friends and family members who are IU fans, and when you do that, use the promo code Assembly20. When you use that promo code at checkout, you will get 20% off your entire order. That's promo code Assembly20 for 20% off your entire order. Go to homefieldapparel.com today and get the most unique and comfortable IU apparel anywhere. All right, well, it is time to move the ball, find the open man, and get some opening thoughts from the rest of our team. We will start with Andy Bottoms. Andy, your Bottoms line on this Indiana victory.
Well, the droughts were still there at times, but I'm going to focus on how this team played down the stretch. They really needed a spark. I think this was around the time that we were texting about Raucous not being in the game, and the spark that he provided in the first half, that somebody needed to provide that in the second half. And I don't think it was too long after that IU got out of another mini drought when Armaan hit a three coming off of a screen. And that started a string of the last 13 possessions of the game where IU scored on 10 of those 13. Now, some of those were splitting 2 free throws, so we can likely talk about that later and how maybe that could have been more. But this team really, with tough circumstances, executed well down the stretch. They had a couple really nice offensive sets. There was one that they ran to Trayce, and Armaan set a nice screen on him to get him a layup. Just the movement on the possession where Al nailed that three at the end was really good. And I thought they executed well on an end of the floor where they have frequently gotten into some pretty deep ruts. And those still happen tonight, but I felt like they weren't as long, and they found ways to pull themselves out of those a little bit quicker than what we've seen in some of these other games. And it was actually, looking back in the first half, there was another lull. Armaan was the guy who broke him out of that with an and one that he played there. So I just thought it was a game where a lot of guys stepped up and made big plays. All 10 guys that played scored, and really a good team effort, and some really shrewd coaching moves, one of which was IU, the way they played ball screens, much to Ryan's chagrin for the majority of the evening. They changed coming out on that last possession. They decided to switch everything, and it really seemed to throw Michigan State off. It took Winston a second to kind of recognize they had drawn something up based on how IU had played that. Took a second, tried to drive on Trayce, who blocked it. They did get a clean look at the basket eventually. But I thought a really good move based on the way that IU has played ball screens really the entire season. I don't really remember many, if any, possessions where they switched on that kind of thing. So I thought that was a good move by Archie down the stretch. And like I said, solid execution in a tight game where they would at least found their way to get to the free throw line. Didn't make as many as we would have wanted, but did some good things where they were able to score when they needed to, not fall into these ruts. And hopefully that gives them some confidence with that in the future when they get into those situations. And it's become pretty clear who the 6 guys are that Archie's going to ride down the stretch at this point. I think we've seen that pretty consistently in the close games that they've had lately, and it's been a good formula for them. So I think we're learning a little bit about this team. I kind of have lamented that at various points over the season, that feels like you're not learning a whole lot. The weeks go by and you don't know anything or feel more confident than you did the week before. So I think we're starting to figure out some of those things, which is a good place to be heading into a really difficult part of the schedule.
Absolutely. All right, Ryan Phillips. Not much to rant about when you beat Michigan State, but man, your boy Race Thompson was just breaking out there in the first half, and then unfortunately takes that hard fall. That was some of the best minutes we've seen from him since the Wisconsin game of last year. He was really good.
We've seen him at times this year just be really active on the offensive glass, not necessarily getting rebounds, but tipping them out or at least making himself a pest. And that led to a steal at one point in this one, and knocked a ball back that got, led to another bucket. So I really hope the Race is okay. He took a really hard fall on his tailbone, so we'll see what comes out of that. But he didn't even warm up in the second half. It was that bad, and you could see him coming off the court, and they were saying, "Are you going to stay in, to take the free throws?" Because he got fouled on that, and he said, "No." You could see him mouthing, "No, I'm out." And he just knows, and that kind of injury can hurt your back and it can stiffen you up. So hopefully Race is okay. Those were some great minutes, and it was nice to see him I think he was the first guy off the bench and really be active like that. What I want to talk about is just toughness. We've talked about this team not having, necessarily the toughness that Archie Miller wants time again, and wilting and going into those long droughts. We saw a long drought tonight again. I think it was about 5 minutes without a field goal. Armaan Franklin, to his credit, stepped up, knocked down a wing three, and I think we're starting to realize that that's Armaan's spot for 3-pointers. If he's gonna take him, it's gonna be on that right wing. Stepped into a shot and nailed it. This team has stretches where it doesn't play well, and it just plays stupid, where guys play selfishly. But tonight, what we saw was they also had stretches of incredible toughness, where they just lock down on defense. I mean, they only gave up 63 points to Michigan State, a team that loves to get up and down and run fast and has maybe the best point guard in the country in Cassius Winston. This team played tough, and there were times they could have wilted. There were a couple big threes that Michigan State hit that were momentum killers. You played a Michigan State team that knocked down 9 threes, shot 43% from 3-point range. I think they had 8 blocks when driving in, but Indiana didn't stop coming. Indiana didn't wilt when those things happened, and we've seen that happen to this team before, where they just kind of get punched and they just kind of wilt. And I really think, I know we've talked about this team maybe trying to take on the personality of Archie, or maybe at times taking on the personality of his seniors. Tonight, it took on the personality of Joey Brunk. I mean, that's what it was. They battled. They were tough. They were fired up. They were focused when they came on the floor. That run at the beginning of the game is as good as Indiana's played this season, and I'm including the Florida State game. The Florida State game, they won by as much as they did and the way they did because you had one player go off for 30 points. This was everybody contributing. This was everybody really grinding it out and chasing rebounds, diving on the floor. You had your 5-star freshman star diving on the floor for a rebound at one or loose ball at one point. And he just had guys working hard. And even when it wasn't pretty, there were hard cuts from guys like Armaan Franklin and even Justin Smith at times was cutting harder than we usually saw. And I just think that this team found some extra toughness. And I'm sure it was, this was a game that was marked on the schedule. I'm sure they want to play big in a game like this. The problem for this team is going to be finding that energy when you're playing Northwestern and Minnesota and teams that, while Minnesota has a good record, but it doesn't bring the mystique of a Michigan State and the challenge of a Michigan State, to your reputation. So the key for this team is finding this kind of energy and finding this kind of heart and toughness every game. And tonight they had it. And when this team is focused and it plays hard and you get guys playing in that Joey Brunk mold of just never giving up and battling for every single thing you get, this is the result. And I think that's at the same time as it's encouraging, it's also a little disheartening because if they had that energy in a few other games, maybe they win those games. And so I think that if you're an Indiana fan tonight, you've got to be so thrilled at how this team played and how much heart and toughness they showed. Now you want to carry it to the next game and the next game and the game after that and keep building on it, because when this team plays the way it should play, it's a pretty darn good team who can battle a team like Michigan State and beat them.
Yeah, no question about it. And, I want to talk about Trayce Jackson-Davis because, he's a guy who really had a couple of rough games against Ohio State and Rutgers. And prior to that Nebraska game, Archie Miller talked about how he, had a conversation with Trayce and, talked to him about the challenges that he was going to face in Big Ten play and sticking with it. And you look at what he's done now over his last couple of games. He has 18 points and 13 rebounds against Nebraska. And tonight, the numbers don't jump off the page, right? 12 points. He was only 5 of 12, so somewhat inefficient inside. Only the 4 rebounds. But I was really impressed with how much he stuck with it, battling a lot of times against one of the best defensive big men in the country in Xavier Tillman. And just his willingness to be a target and to get the ball down low and allow Indiana to play inside out. He had a couple of assists too. And obviously that block at the end of the game, although I'm looking at the stat sheet and it doesn't credit him with a block. Not quite sure how they missed that one.
They might be trying to say Osterman that was a pass.
Yeah, there's some. I guess I saw somebody say that Trayce in the postgame said he blocked whatever it was that was
okay.
going up there.
It looked from one angle like Winston was throwing the pass to Tillman. Well, instead of it being a shot, but
whatever.
I think we should get credit
one
for
of the best blocked passes in Indiana history. Then that's fine, but. For a freshman, to kind of seem like he's hitting that freshman wall and fight through it. And Ryan, like you said, diving on the floor. I mean, really making a lot of hustle plays, taking on that personality of Joey Brunk. I think these last 2 performances have been really impressive from Trayce. Just the mindset that he has and his ability to step up in a game like this with some real men down low and play toe-to-toe with him and be a huge part of the reason why Indiana won, Andy. I just thought, even though the numbers weren't the best he's had all season, I thought it was one of Trayce's more impressive performances of the year.
Well, it's one. I guess I'll go. I think you said both of our names, but I'll just wait till Ryan interrupts me, and then it'll kind of serve the same purpose, so it'll be fine. But I think you're right. He really didn't back down from the challenge of going against Tillman, and they eventually, Tillman ended up with 4 fouls. One of those was the one on Jerome late, but they had to take him out at one point in the second half a little bit because he had gotten 3 fouls. I thought both Trayce and Joey were aggressive in trying to go after him. That was one area where Michigan State will play other big guys alongside him, and those are the guys that you want to attack a little bit more. But they are a little bit thin there, and I think it was clear that was an emphasis. And I thought early in the game they did a really good job of getting the ball inside, getting it inside quickly, and forcing Michigan State to react. When the offense struggled, it was when they got away from those things for one reason or another. And but I did think he stepped up, played well. Thought he played fairly well defensively. The last possession stands out, obviously, but I thought he continued to really play well on that end. Struggled a little bit at the free throw line, like a number of guys did, but I think the toughness that he continues to show as a freshman, going up against some of these guys, and really not backing down, trying to find ways. I thought he showed in some ways some better footwork tonight, where he was a little bit.
I agree with that for sure.
Finished with his right hand once.
Yeah, I mean, typically he's a guy who will make, kind of one quick move or whatever, but he, I don't know if he's been watching Joey Brunk film, but I thought there were times when he was, doing a lot, having to make more moves to be able to get shots, but was willing to be patient enough to do that. So you just continue to see really strong growth from him at this point in the season, and another solid game from him, as you said.
Yeah, I think that with Trayce, the one thing that Michigan State knows how to do is shut down a guy. I mean, Tom Izzo is a master game planner, knows how to take one guy out at least, sometimes two. And I thought that despite that, he was clearly their focus. Every time he touched the ball, everybody on the defense was watching him. And you could just see it. Their heads were slightly turned, keep an eye on him. The guy they didn't always double, but the help would come. Sometimes there'd be a guy kind of floating in the area, not quite doubling, but maybe giving the idea that he was going to double. And I thought the kid handled it really well. He moved the ball well out of the post. To handle as much as he did and not turn the ball over for a freshman was pretty incredible. One thing Indiana did tonight that they haven't done consistently, they were throwing the ball into the post pretty much all night. There were a couple stretches of a few minutes where, like 2 minutes where maybe they didn't get it in. But there was definitely a focus and people were looking. And there were a couple times where, on an offensive set, they didn't get it inside, but you'd see that they were trying to. Guys would come across and maybe they just weren't open enough. That's going to happen.
And they even dribbled and repositioned themselves to find a better angle.
And it was
amazing.
Like, everything that he's teaching them is finally sinking in. Again, we got to see how they keep it up, but it was encouraging. And I thought Jackson-Davis, look, you got Tillman on you. That's a fantastic defender and a fantastic Big Ten player, and you're working against him. And to come away with those 12 points, he hits a couple more free throws. We're looking at a 16-point effort and that big block at the end, and some really good defense to affect shots, or especially early in the game. So I think that you can be critical of the numbers, but really, if you watch that game, he was a huge focal point of the offense, as was Joey Brunk all night, both of those guys. And I thought that Indiana against better teams has really struggled to get the ball into the post and get those guys involved. And that was not a problem tonight. And even, even when they came up short, I mean, combined, Brunk and Jackson-Davis missed 12 shots, but they still were such a huge part of the offense. And a lot of times, if you miss a shot, you might be getting bumped or whatever, and they just didn't call a foul. I mean, they were working to get calls and to get points, and that's something that hasn't happened in some of the bigger games for IU this year.
Yeah, look, I think we've pretty much know that it's rarely going to be pretty for this team. Like, actually, this was a pretty win for the way Indiana wants to play. You out-rebound Michigan State. You get the ball inside on most of your possessions. You only turn it over 8 times. We'll go through the numbers later, but, you win the free throw battle, getting 20 free throws. I think they had 10 or 11, something like that. Like, this is how Indiana wants to play. And the difference, of course, Ryan, as you pointed out, is between the Florida State game and this game, when Indiana, quote unquote, wins pretty is when Devontae goes off from 3, or someone, hits 3 or 4 3-pointers. That didn't happen tonight, and this team was able to grind out. That has proven to be
an unsustainable formula.
So. Yes, I would say so. But this team...
I think we said on that postgame show that might be an unsustainable formula.
Take it whenever it happens, but, we're not going to count on it. But, and that's why I don't want to get out of this first segment without giving a hat tip to the coaching staff. And I know we've said that some, but for them to help this team battle through some of the doldrums that they had there in December and early January. And now Indiana's won 4 out of 5 Big Ten games and really seems to be maybe not making meteoric improvements from game to game, but you see them slowly and steadily improving some of these things that that we want them to do. Get the ball inside more. They're, reducing the length of some of these droughts. He's shortening the rotation in crunch time. Like, a lot of the stuff that we felt like this team needed to do, they are doing, and more importantly, it's working. And so I think, big tip of the cap to the coaching staff for having this team ready to play, and then for guiding them through, Andy, kind of that tough stretch there in the second half where they really hit the skids. I thought Archie was intense all night long and just was not going to let his team let up. Like, you could just see the
Archie
energy he was giving. Yeah, you could. And I think sometimes that matters, and you could just see it. And I think their ability to do that for this team, the staff really deserves some credit, because I think as this season goes along, they're finding out what works for this group. They're sitting Devontae when he's not going well. They're letting Armaan play more when he is playing well. This is the stuff that has to happen for this group to win, and right now it's happening.
Yeah, I felt like in large part from a substitution standpoint, they tended to push the right buttons tonight. They went to race early. Trayce got an early foul, and I think we're trying to keep him from a situation where he would get a second. They went to race early. He really responded, and it allowed them to leave Trayce on the bench for a bit. Kind of same thing with Rob. I think he got a foul relatively early on, and it's kind of one of those where it's, those are the two guys that you really can't afford to lose for any period of time. And so I thought they did a good job subbing there. As you said, Devontae was, I thought, poor for the majority of the game that he was in there. And I would argue maybe even at times was in a little bit too long, but went to Armaan, and Armaan responded with a couple big plays, and I thought made solid lineup decisions. Jerome didn't get as much time, really got a little bit to relieve Trayce, because then they moved Justin over to the 4 with Race hurt in the second half. So I thought they did some good things. I thought we talked about some of the decisions at the end of the game, ran some nice sets. They also had the play where they Joey slipped the screen and got a nice hook shot down there toward the end. I thought IU found a variety of ways to score down the stretch when they really needed baskets. And I think you give the coaching staff credit. I think they have really tightened the rotation up a bit. We can point to the fact that a lot of guys played, but you're really starting to see a little bit more continuity because these games are ending with similar combinations of players on the floor. And I think some of the play on the stretch tonight is potentially reaping the benefits of some of that continuity that's really been lacking. So I agree with them. He was definitely intense. Thought he was going to lose his mind on the one that should have been a travel call that eventually led to a 3-pointer
first half,
by Michigan State. So but yeah, I think they feed off of that. And we've talked about they need guys to be more emotional. I think Joey stepped into that really well. But they need some emotion there that's under control but intense, and I thought that's what he was tonight.
Yep. Okay, coming up as we continue our breakdown of Indiana's 4-point victory over Michigan State, we will talk about tonight's meaningful moments that you might have missed, and then we will go inside the numbers to highlight the most important statistical notes from this game. You are listening to another victorious episode of the Assembly Call. Stick with us.
What's going on? It's Christian Wofford. What's the only thing better than an epic buzzer beater? Celebrating it with friends afterwards. Join my guys Jerod, Andy, Ryan, and Coach on the Assembly Call after every IU game. Go Hoosiers.
Thank you, Christian. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. I am Jerod Morris here with Andy Bottoms and Ryan Phillips, and we are breaking down Indiana's 67-63 victory over the Michigan State Spartans tonight at Simon Skjodt Assembly Hall. And it is time, guys, for tonight's meaningful moments that you might have missed. And I believe that you have both alluded to these already, but I want to spend a little bit of time highlighting Armaan Franklin, who I thought really had some big moments. He scored 6 points tonight. Again, numbers that don't jump off the page, but I thought the timing of his buckets were absolutely huge. So I'm going to take you back to the first half. Indiana jumps out to that big lead, but at this point, it's 27-24 Indiana. Michigan State is on a little run, and you kind of feel like, hey, this is a danger zone here because you've been in control. You don't want to give up the lead before halftime. And so right before the under 4-minute timeout, Armaan Franklin gets it on the left wing, recognizes that there's no help, so just attacks. As soon as he saw that, he drives, finishes, gets an and one, makes the free throw out of the timeout, and then on the next defensive possession, Indiana forces good defense. They force a miss. Armaan and Trayce get on the floor for the loose ball. Trayce gets it ahead to Armaan. He finds a running Race Thompson who scores, and boom, just like that, it's 32-24, and that quick 5-0 run really reestablished control for Indiana, and they would take a 37-30 lead into the half, and Armaan was right there in the middle of both of them. And then Ryan, 51-48 in the second half, and this was where Indiana was having that drought. No field goals for 5 minutes. They're really struggling, and Michigan State actually missed a couple of opportunities to extend that beyond a one-possession lead. Aaron Henry had a turnover.
Nerve-wracking.
Yeah, he had a turnover. He missed a 3, late shot clock on a really good defensive possession by Indiana. And that's when Armaan stepped up and drained his 3 from the right wing. It was a little dribble handoff from Brunk, a great seal by Joey Brunk, again, just doing the little things that help his teammates out. And Armaan drains it. And it was interesting because right as he got the ball, Gus Johnson started talking about, now that leadership question for Indiana. And who was it that stepped up and provided that leadership? It was Armaan Franklin. And, those plays, and I know we've talked about, Ryan, At times he's a little bit over aggressive. Maybe at times he shoots a little bit quickly. But over the last few games, it seems like he's figuring out how to harness it. And it feels like he's picking his spots a little bit more. And I tell you, on a team that sometimes struggles to get plays from guards, and you either have a guard in Devontae Green who tries to do too much, or maybe a guy like Al Durham that sometimes is a little bit reticent, although we're going to get to him because he had some big moments. Armaan is a guy who has that attacking mindset, and I think he's starting to figure out better where to pick his spots. And tonight he picked 2 huge spots because they were both huge momentum shifters for Indiana when it looked like Michigan State might take control of the game. And I know you would like to talk about that now.
Yeah, no, I think that he. So you didn't mention who you.
I did. I said Ryan, but then I talked for like 2 more minutes.
But then you talked for an hour. No, I think that Franklin, you're starting to see what kind of player he can be. And look, he's never going to be at least I'm talking about this year. He's not going to be a knockdown 3-point shooter. He needs to rein that instinct in sometimes, because there are sometimes he gets the ball on offense and he just attacks into nowhere, and he's a freshman. That's what you expect. And
you'd rather have to slow a guy down than speed him up as a coach.
Exactly. Yeah. He's a freshman. And so when I do get frustrated with him, it's in the context of him being a freshman. And so, there are times where he fires too many 3-pointers and he's not a knockdown 3-point shooter. That's not the shot we want, Armaan. You look to throw it inside. If you're not standing absolutely alone, don't hit that. That instance, it was an in-rhythm 3 that he shot from the corner, from the wing, which is clearly his best spot on the floor. He has shown that. So you're fine with it, and it goes in. Obviously, it's a big lift. But I think defensively what he provides is what excites you. And there are times where he'll get his hands into his defender, and we have a group text going, and everybody brings it up whenever it happens.
No, and you bring it up every time it happens.
I do. So does Coach. The both of us do. And it's frustrating because it's a bad habit that he never kicked between high school. But it's a bad habit that a freshman has. You expect those things. But if you put your hands on a guy driving, the officials are going to call that every single time. So it's just a bad habit he's got to kick as he continues to get older. But I think that you see the aggressiveness, you see the attitude and the willingness to play defense. And it's exactly what we saw out of him in high school, just on a higher level now. And I think that offensively things will come for him, but he just at times in some games when it's slowed down, he tries to force it a little too much. And he just got to kind of take a step back and get your shots within the offense. Don't try and create, there's at no point should Armaan Franklin be taking 2 dribbles and pulling up from 15 feet. That's just not his game, and that's not what Indiana's looking for. And so I thought he was great tonight. I thought he was smart tonight for the most part. And I thought that defensively he gave so much effort. And there was a stretch there where he was guarding Cassius Winston, and Indiana did not look the worse for it. So I think that Armaan really had a great night and one he should be really happy about.
And it seems like Archie trusts him more than the senior, which just is where we are here in this season.
Well, I think you just look at him. He runs hard through cuts. He was really fighting through screens, which is what you have to do with Winston. And that's why Rob had been even going back to last year, had been really effective at guarding him. He just would fight through everything and didn't make anything easy. You're going to give up baskets. He's going to make fouls. He's going to do, the things that we talked about that apparently we all text about, but it's really just Ryan. He's going to make those plays, but he's making mistakes out of effort, as opposed to being casual.
For sure.
Yes.
And so I think those are the things that you can live with. And even Bill Raftery, when he first came in the game in the first half, talked about he's a really good prospect, going to be a good player. Anytime you can get Raftery on the call, that's a good thing. But I thought that was a good comment of just kind of recognition of what he's seen from him thus far and being able to project forward and what he can be. So he's really he's been put in some difficult situations at first in the season because of the injuries. But lately, just some of the crunch time minutes that he's gotten, and he really more often than not has responded well to those. And if you think about spinning that forward to what he will be a few years from now, I think that's an exciting thing to think about. But I just thought really was, focused effort wise on defense. And he's one that for all the talk about the rotation and who's going to earn minutes, like he is a guy who, without a doubt, is stepping in and doing everything he can to carve out more time for himself on the floor. And he's a guy that's being rewarded with that. So that's what everybody wanted earlier in the season, had complained about at times that it didn't seem like, play and doing the things that the coach wanted to do were leading to earning those extra opportunities. But with him, I think that's definitely been the case. And kudos to him for really stepping up and taking that opportunity and making the most of it.
By the way, did he set the best screen of the season on that little back screen on Trayce Jackson-Davis?
That was a really good screen for sure.
And the best part of it is that all night Trayce was down screening for a guard from that same spot, and they just flipped it and got the back screen instead. It was perfect, and it was so well done. And it's almost like they were setting him up for it for a while. I wonder if they've run that at all this year, and they were just setting teams up for it, saving it for the Michigan State game to reverse it.
Yeah. So one other moment that I want to mention, look, everybody remembers Al Durham's 2 threes. They were huge. One at the end of the first half, the one at the end of the game that made it 63-60. Very easily could have been, the banner moment tonight. It was a huge shot, and Indiana didn't get many threes tonight. They only had 4 of them, but my goodness, it felt like every single one of them was absolutely huge. But the moment from Al that really stood out to me, and it was right after the one I talked about with Armaan when Indiana was down 51-48 and just no offense. And they were struggling to get the ball inside. And so after that play where Armaan hits the 3, Cassius Winston goes down and makes a free throw. That makes it 52-51 Michigan State. And Indiana has another one of those possessions, Andy, where just nothing's going on. It's late shot clock. Al gets it on the left wing, and it's just like, I got to go. And he drives left, takes contact, scores. And it was, again, one of those times when Al drove to hit the basket, not just drove to get fouled. And he scored. He took the contact. He scored. It put Indiana ahead. And I just thought it was a really huge moment for those 2 guards out there in a game where Indiana needed to get it inside. During this segment, they had to have guards step up and make plays, and Armaan and Al did it. And so Al finishes with 11 points. The 2 threes are the big ones, but I thought that bucket that he made right there was just as big.
Yeah, he made that, and I think he made a free throw after that. Missed the first, made the second. So he scored those three points right in a row there. I do agree with you. There were a couple times during the game where he drove trying to get fouled and got chucked into the stanchion a time or two, I think. But that was really one where he took control, and we've seen probably too many late shot clock situations where maybe the wrong guy ends up with a ball in his hands and you're trying to figure out something to do. But he was decisive. I thought that was the biggest thing with that. It wasn't trying to dribble around. He went straight to the bucket, tried to make something happen, finished well through that, and I thought had a really solid offensive game in terms of taking care of the ball. I think that's what you can really go to with all of them. Only 8 turnovers for the game. I think Jay put in the chat it was the lowest turnover percentage of the season. So a good performance by those guys. Still had his struggles defensively when we talk about Al, but really stepped up in, as you said, 3 really key moments and made big baskets that made a huge difference in the game.
Has Jay apologized for his less than mediocre pregame opinions about Al Durham when I chose Al as my pick to click? And he had a very snarky GIF response. I'll be accepting that apology on Twitter, Jay. Thank you. Yeah. So will Al.
When Al stepped into both those threes, I thought they were really good shots, and he got them. And that one play, you're right, where they, got the down screen, he came off it and he had that big 3 later. You discussed it earlier, and that was just a perfect set and a perfect catch and shoot opportunity. Even with a guy closing out late to it, he concentrated, he finished his shot. And then I would say that drive was really good recognition from him to just take it off the wing, and because he had a step on the guy helping, who was in help defense, shifting over. And again, you're right. There are times where he drives and he's clearly just looking for a foul. And that was definitely a time. And you just feel like if he would drive to finish more often, and you've said that a number of times, Jerod, if he would just drive to finish more often, he'd probably score more. But he, even after he made that one, screamed and won at the official. It's just like, get that out of your head. But they're either going to call it or they're not. You got to go up strong and try and score every time.
Andy, any moments that stuck out to you that we haven't gotten to yet?
I feel like you hit the ones that I would have circled there. We talked about a lot of the late game stuff, the plays that Al made. Those are really the ones that stood out to me.
I do want to talk about that last possession when they basically waited until like 10 seconds. But let's talk about that during the next segment. Let's hit stats here real quick, and then we can get to segment 3. Numbers, Andy, that jumped out to you.
Well, I think the turnovers we talked about, they had 8 for the game, 4 in each half. And really a couple of the ones in the second half were down the stretch. They were within the last couple of minutes. But I thought really took good care of the ball, which you really have to do if you're not going to make a ton of threes and not shoot a whole bunch. I thought that was the other thing. You really didn't get baited into taking a bunch of threes. I only shot 12 for the game, made 4 as you mentioned earlier. Really focused on getting the ball into the paint and got to the free throw line a decent number of times. Just didn't convert at a high rate, but ended with 34 points in the paint. I think they had 20 in the first half, which was important. Basically played Michigan State to a stalemate on the glass, got more offensive rebounds than Michigan State did, outscored them in second chance points by 7. Really a lot of the little things I thought they did well. And that's what this team has to do in order to make up for some of the deficiencies that they do have. You're not going to make a ton of threes. So you've got to take better care of the basketball. And I thought that was really as much as anything, what the difference was, because they executed relatively well on the stretch and, just weren't having empty possessions. When this team is playing at its worst, they're really careless. The turnovers snowball, as we've seen a number of times. And, if there's one number to point out, it's that one. Like I said, I've seen a couple people say it's the lowest turnover percentage of the season. So a really big thing that helped offset some of the other things that maybe they didn't do as well offensively, like shoot free throws and make a ton of threes. So that was what stood out to me.
It's worth pointing out Michigan State doesn't turn teams over a lot, so you would expect the turnover percentage to be down a little bit. But one thing they do,
there's plenty of times that hasn't mattered.
Well,
but yes, you're
no, I know. It's not to necessarily take away that importance, because Indiana's had a lot of just self-imposed turnovers that they didn't have. But one thing Michigan State does do better than anybody, and they have ever since Cassius Winston's been there, is their assist rate. And it is 68.3% of their field goals are assisted. That is number 1 in the country. I don't think it's particularly close. And tonight, you can tell the kind of job Indiana did defensively against a Michigan State team that is 13th nationally in offense. Michigan State only had 13 assists on 22 field goals. So that's still greater than 50%, but it's not nearly their elite level. And that's how they want to play. And so we've talked a lot about how sometimes teams come into Assembly Hall and they're a little bit too comfortable, and that's why guys go off and start making shots. And Michigan State did get a few open three-pointers tonight, because of some late rotations and because of how much they were overplaying Cassius Winston and hedging those ball screens. But you can see how much Indiana disrupted what Michigan State wants to do from that assist rate. And I just thought it was really, for the most part, an outstanding defensive performance from a team that just keeps getting better and better defensively. Any other stats? Ryan, are you with us for stats?
Yeah. I thought that it was interesting that and I mentioned this before, but Michigan State hit 43% of its threes. And I think that if you came into this game, so Michigan State is going to hit 43% of its threes, Indiana's only going to hit 55% from the free throw line, I think you'd say that Michigan State was going to win the game. And one of the ways that Indiana has to keep teams from scoring, because Indiana can't match teams on the 3-point line, is to keep that percentage low and make them shoot a lot of contested bad shots. Michigan State, despite what I thought was pretty good defense from Indiana for most of the night, got some open looks and knocked them down, and Indiana managed to weather that storm. There, Michigan State 6 of 10 in the second half. The other thing, 2 teams that really pride themselves on rebounding, Indiana 31-29 won the battle of the glass. Obviously huge. I mean, Michigan State is Tom Izzo's thing is beating teams on the glass and beating them into submission on the glass. Indiana beat them tonight, and then the other one, 34 points in the paint against 18. You do that against Michigan State, you're going to win the game. And I thought that Indiana really attacked and did a great job of forcing the ball into the paint and then having, guys drive in, try and score that way. And Rob Finney had a couple of really nice drives where he finished tonight that some of them probably classified as in the paint and some probably didn't, because he had that one little pull up that he put in. But I thought those were huge. Winning the toughness battle, winning, in the paint, and then winning on the boards was huge for Indiana tonight.
Yep. All right, coming up on the Assembly Call, we are going to hand out our game balls. Then we will hit some other lingering storylines. Still want to talk about that offensive possession. And then we'll look ahead to what is next for this Indiana team with another big test coming on Sunday. Then it will be time for Last Call. Stick with us on the Assembly Call.
This is Jordan Halls, and I never miss a shot or an episode of the Assembly Call.
Thank you, Jordan. You are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Catch us live immediately following every IU basketball game, plus every Thursday night at our website, assemblycall.com. While you are there, make sure that you sign up for our free IU Hoops email newsletter. Over 7,000 of your fellow IU fans have subscribed. You can also text IU to 66866 to subscribe to the newsletter. That is IU to 66866. I'm Jerod Morris here with Ryan Phillips and Andy Bottoms. We are breaking down Indiana's victory tonight over the Michigan State Spartans as the Hoosiers move to 5-3 in a very crowded and jam-packed Big Ten. With I think it's now Michigan State and Illinois tied at 6-2, and then like 15 teams tied at 5-3. Not really, obviously. There's like 4 or 5 teams, I think, tied at 5-3. It's very jumbled, as it will probably be here for the rest of the season. But it's time now for our game balls. I saw someone mention in the chat, why aren't we talking about Joey Brunk more? He was the banner moment. We have sprinkled in conversation about him, but I think we all
were
also
waiting
knew
for this moment.
I think we know where the game ball is going tonight. So let's just make this the Joey Brunk appreciation segment. And hey, feel free to go elsewhere with your game ball if you wish. But Andy, you can do the honors first.
Well, in some of Archie's post-game comments, he talked about Brunk. He's improved as much as any player I've been around from month to month. He's absolutely brought us production. It just means the world. He's a guy. I feel like every game there's either people in the chat, people on Twitter that are like, I was dogging, hand up. I was dogging this guy early in the season, wondering, what they saw in him at times. But he is really, and we've talked about it on either post-game shows or on the radio show, just how consistent he's been. He has improved as Archie talked about over the course of the season. They're trying to do some different things ball screen wise tonight to really prevent Winston from turning the corner, and that did lead to some baskets, and that's been a criticism of him. But just from an emotional standpoint, him walking off the court after Durham made that big three down the stretch, he's as fired up as anybody, and I think that's the kind of emotion that has generally been lacking from this team for I'm not even sure how many seasons, to be honest with you. And so I think he's just been such a spark and kind of a rock for these guys that they can try to get the ball to. Seems to be in the right spot to, the fantasy drive toward the end where he just happens to be in the right spot, be able to get it up before the shot clock runs out. And so I thought a really strong performance from him, gave IU the chance to do some different things. Defensively didn't, have to put Trayce in positions where where Trayce had to guard Tillman. They could be able to kind of switch back and forth and do that. And so I think having another big guy that can play in those scenarios is a great thing. And I thought he just came up with a number of clutch buckets, played good at the start, made some big plays down the stretch, and overall really strong game from Joey.
Yeah, his game log is just remarkable. I mean, he has become this team's clear most consistent contributor, and it's not even close. Ryan, who gets your game ball? You going with Joey?
Yeah, you got it tonight. I just think that Joey's energy was consistent throughout. I think that his production was consistent throughout. It wasn't like he clustered points in the first half and then didn't show up in the second half. I thought he was really, really a key player all night. And some of the things that have dogged Joey are little turnovers. And tonight, the only turnover he had was a bad call on a travel. I didn't think he moved his feet, and they called him for a travel. I love calling out big men for shuffling their feet, and I did not think he traveled on that one. But 14 points, 7 to 12 from the field, 6 rebounds. He was in there for a lot more rebounds, battled and poked him around, and for his teammates to come get. I just thought it was a fantastic showing for Joey, and he did all that in only 28 minutes. It wasn't like he played 36. And he was very efficient when he was on the floor. And I think that Indiana suffered when he was off the floor. And I think earlier in the season, I think there were times where Indiana played a lot better when he was off the floor. And I don't think that's the case anymore. So credit to Joey for getting better. I thought there were a couple times he got hung up on screens and flattening out a little too long. But those are split-second decisions, and college kids are going to mess those up. I just thought it was an outstanding performance from Joey, and I thought that he's easily my pick for game ball.
Yeah, he's had an offensive rating of 93 or better in every game since the Wisconsin game. Just really, that horrible performance by Indiana. He was, chief among the guys not playing well, but he's really stepped it up since then. He's had an offensive rating of 107 or better in 6 of Indiana's last 7 games. And if you're not familiar with offensive rating, just know that number is really, really good. That is, and again, we've talked for really the last 3 years, how challenging it has to be for Archie Miller to try and figure out who we can count on from a night in, night out basis. And this team, it feels like you're starting to get some of those guys. You feel like you can count on Joey Brunk. Really, outside of a couple of performances, you can count on Trayce Jackson-Davis. And some of these guards are starting to come around and play a little bit more consistently. So that's really good to see. My game ball obviously goes to Joey Brunk, but I do want to just give an honorable mention to Trayce Jackson-Davis, who I thought, again, it's one of those things like the numbers aren't great. He's had better. But given the moment, given the opposition, given how this game was played, he was huge. And obviously his defensive play at the end of the game. What is it with these home games against Michigan State coming down to us having to contain Cassius Winston on the final possession? It's ironic how much we've talked about this team struggling
last
with containing.
Last time that'll have to happen though, right?
Yes, thank goodness. Because, by the way, and this might be the last postgame show that we do for a Cassius Winston game because Indiana doesn't play Michigan State again this year, right? So I guess we could play them in the Big Ten tournament, but that would require winning games in the Big Ten tournament. So let's not get ahead of ourselves.
That'll go well if that happens.
Let's not get ahead of ourselves. Let's just enjoy this one and not talk about that. But just real quick, he's been one of my favorite players to watch play in the Big Ten, Cassius Winston. A wizard with the ball, a guy who puts every pass right where it needs to go. And he got hot, and Indiana, I thought, really had a great defensive strategy against him, Andy, in the first half, and really just kind of overplayed him. We're going to make other guys beat him and just not let him do Cassius Winston things off the dribble. And then I thought they brought him off the ball, and that was a great adjustment. And Indiana was able to adjust again at the end of the game. So it was a nice little chess match there with one of, just one of the best and most talented offensive players we've seen in the conference. And it's been a joy to watch these games come down to the end where you've got to stop that guy. And that's why it makes it rewarding to win these games, because now 2 years in a row at home, Indiana's been able to do it. And that's really saying something because he's gotten a lot of teams. So I tip my cap to that young man. He's dealt with a lot this season. He's now the Big Ten's all-time assist leader. And it's been a joy to watch him play. I'm glad we don't have to face him anymore, though.
It was it's funny. I remember walking out of the Michigan State game last year, and there was a Michigan State fan close to us, and I was like, man, I'm so glad he's not back. And then he was like, oh, yeah, he's just a junior. And then I was like, oh, well, that's demoralizing. But I did think
like, he'll definitely be going to the NBA, though, right? There's
I didn't think that, unfortunately. But it was, as you said, a good chess match between the coaches because IU had they tried to string out those screens as best they could, and really try to make somebody else beat them. And there were times early in the game where Michigan State was getting open shots and not making them. They started to make more of those in the second half, and then they would basically get Winston in a case where he'd reverse the ball, and it was tended to be Tillman at the wing and driving and a shooter in the corner, and it basically left whoever was guarding the shooter, which in a couple cases at the beginning of the second half was Al, to basically decide, I'm either going to cut off this drive, hope that the help gets there from somebody else. Those were really the two options at that point. And so they got a couple buckets that way. IU adjusted a little bit to that, but then when Michigan State, eventually made Winston that guy in the corner, I thought Devontae got in a bad spot a couple times with that and really ran Winston off of some screens and got him going. I thought that was a good move by Izzo. And we talked about the 3-point shooting for Michigan State in the second half. They made their first 5, but then they were 1 of 5 on the ones thereafter. So, water finds its level, all those kinds of things. They missed a bunch early. They hit some late in the first half, hit some early in the second half, and then missed a bunch late as well. But it was a fun game. But yeah, he's a guy that you would prefer to just watch from afar, playing somebody else and carving up somebody else, as opposed to living in constant fear of what he's going to do to your own defense. But I thought in general, you defended him pretty well. He's a guy who's going to get his points. You mentioned the assist rate was a big one. I thought in general they took Michigan State out of some things that they really wanted to do.
And a big part of guarding Cassius Winston obviously was Rob Finney. And he's a guy who we haven't
years in a row.
Yeah, and we haven't talked a ton about him. Another guy whose numbers they're not going to jump off the page. 8 points, 4 assists, did have 3 turnovers. But in a season of real up and down performances from Rob, this was a real solid one. I thought, for the most part, was pretty good defensively. I think he's just not going to be fully healthy all year long. Archie said that a month and a half ago, and it's easy to forget that because he's out there playing every night, but he's dealing with some injuries. He's not 100%. And so, I know some people were talking in the chat that he looked like he was really hobbled at the end of the game. So I don't know if he got hurt again. But he continues to battle through it, and I thought he provided a steadying influence, especially early in the game. And then defensively, when Cassius went off and started going, I think that began when Rob was off the court, and then they had to get him back on there. And he's the best and savviest on-ball defender we had, and for the most part did a really good job of kind of quarterbacking Indiana through some of those possessions where Cassius had the ball. And that's 2 years in a row now that we've seen that from Rob. And that's, you can look at the offensive numbers and you want him to be more of a catalyst there, but what he provides for the defense is just as important, if not more important, than what he provides to the offense. Ryan, if you want to give some quick thoughts.
For sure. No, and I thought that Rob came out actually aggressive offensively. He was really forcing the post. I thought that he was really trying to probe defensively. I mean, there are times where he does those dribble handoffs and he just walks side to side. This time he was giving a jab step inside, and if the coverage was good, then he'd back it out and kind of go to his wing spot. And I thought that it was an interesting approach and a different approach from Rob, where usually he's a little passive to start games. Obviously, that wasn't the case. What home game was it where he knocked those 3 threes down early? Ohio State, thank you. Where he was aggressive there shooting, but he wasn't, probing and driving. And I thought that he looked to drive more tonight. And we've talked about him really needing to get that confidence going.
All right, so real quick, I just want to say bye to our radio audience. I know when this show gets played on the radio, since this postgame show is doubling as Assembly Call radio, we're going to have to say bye to you guys. If you want to hear the rest of the show, go to assemblycall.com. You can always get our podcast because we still have more that we talk about here on the postgame show. We appreciate you all listening. We'll talk to you Sunday after the IU Maryland game, and then obviously we'll be back for Assembly Call radio next week. So thank you for listening, and go Hoosiers. Okay, now back here for the rest of the post-game show. Andy, your quick thoughts on Rob Phinisee.
I think really defensively, I touched on it earlier, just watching him fight through screens is somewhat being there last year, watching him defend Winston, you saw more of the same, but it's not easy. It's basically getting put through the ringer trying to go through all these ball screens with him, and he continued to do a really good job there. And I agree with you guys. He was smartly aggressive on offense. I think there have been times where he's forced things just to try to ignite things and get things going. I don't think they're plays made out of selfishness, but I think he puts a lot on himself to be able to, try to get guys going. And so sometimes he'll drive to the basket and maybe not be able to finish, but I think he's out there trying to make things happen based on aggressiveness. So I thought it was another solid game from him. And it's one of those that it's games like these and tight games against good teams that really underscore the players who are the most important and reinforce, in this case, just how important Rob is on both ends of the floor. He was a settling force offensively and was a guy that you could count on to go and do a good job defending the other team's best player. And you just watch games like that and realize or reconfirm to yourself just how important he really is. And just a really solid performance. It's not a game that they win without him by any stretch of the imagination, especially with so little guard depth.
The other guy that we need to mention is Justin Smith. Not the great numbers. He is a guy who really produced well against Michigan State last year. We all remember what he did to rescue Indiana from, when they were down 15, 16 points early against Michigan State in that home game last year, and he started uncorking some 3-pointers, much to the chagrin
arguably
of Tom
the most
Izzo.
surprising, arguing one of the most surprising offensive outbursts in Indiana basketball history.
It was, and he didn't do that tonight. He did take a couple of shots that I thought were a little bit early, a couple of jumpers in the first half, but he really got those out of his system, and we didn't see many more of them. He wasn't really able to get going offensively, but I think to his credit, he didn't force it, and he, kind of found some ways to be a ball mover and to, just not clog things up in the post, and you can't really talk about a good Indiana defensive performance without talking about Justin. Yes, he got lost, was late a couple of times getting out to Gabe Brown, But, the reason why he gets 34 minutes in a game like this, which is more minutes than anybody else, is because Archie Miller really trusts him on the defensive end of the court. And he's kind of a glue guy on defense back there. And so the numbers don't jump out. He obviously had that huge opportunity at a dunk in transition when Rob sailed the pass over his head. That would have been big. A big momentum play that Indiana wasn't able to get when it was 44-40. But I think, just a solid effort from Justin overall. And I think the fact that he didn't try to do too much on offense allowed for Trayce and Joey to get more touches inside, which was important. So you'd like to see Justin be able to produce more, but that just wasn't really in the cards tonight. But still, I thought a useful performance from him as Indiana's minutes leader. Any thoughts on him from you fine gentlemen? No. Okay.
I thought there were some. Sorry, I had to unmute myself, which I rarely mute myself for obvious reasons. But no, I thought that Justin made.
Has Madeline ever figured out how to mute you?
No, she's regretted it.
If we haven't figured it out in 10 years, you guys
know me better than that. I will say Justin made his free throws tonight. He was 4 or 5
he did.
from the line, and that was something that Indiana wasn't doing on the whole as a team. So I thought that was important. I thought that there were stretches defensively where he played pretty well. I thought that Xavier Henry and he was a matchup nightmare for Indiana. And
wait, who?
Aaron Henry. What's his name? Henry. Yeah,
well,
Aaron Henry.
It's either Xavier Tillman or Aaron Henry.
Yeah, I was thinking Aaron Henry. I'm sorry. I got those two guys messed up because there used to be.
Yeah, he really got going there for a stretch.
Yeah. And I thought that was a matchup nightmare for Indiana at one point, but I thought that Justin really calmed that down. And I thought that he actually gave some good minutes sort of playing as a 4 too. And I thought that was really key to, especially given that Trayce had some, they didn't have Race Thompson in the second half and Trayce needed some rest. Joey Brunk needed some rest. I thought Justin gave some good minutes defensively. Offensively, I think it's just always going to be a mixed bag, but it's, you got to take what you can get from him. I was surprised we didn't see more of Jerome Hunter for him, but I think that Archie wanted to tighten the rotation.
I don't think Jerome was ready for the game.
No, I don't think so either.
I think he finished well, but it was as shaky as I've seen him early. Like he had that one play where Joey got the ball in the post and he just inexplicably cut along the baseline and totally messed Joey up. Mm-hmm. He didn't have the same Jerome verve that we've seen when he gets in, he's ready to go offensively. It was like the moment was going a little too fast for him in the first half.
This was the first opportunity he's had as a key rotation player to be in this kind of atmosphere. He's been in the rotation for games with the crowd a little bit, a couple times. But this is the first time since he's become like a 20-minute a game guy where he's had this big, huge Big Ten matchup with the crowd, all 17,000 screaming, whatever. And it seemed a little big for him. But again, freshmen run into that. And he's, as Archie keeps saying, he's a true freshman more than he's a redshirt freshman. And so I was surprised that we didn't see more opportunities for him to come in and maybe see if he had settled down a little bit. He seemed to play early and didn't play well and got buried. And hey, in a close game, you got to do that. You got to shorten your rotation and you only put the guys out there who are doing things for
He's clearly part of Indiana's crunch time defensive lineup though, and then he stepped up and made those 2 free throws when no one else did. So
good for him.
He got back into the moment after struggling a little bit.
I agree. I was surprised we didn't see him earlier in the second half, but no,
I wasn't with how he played in the first half.
I think part of that was that Smith was playing well defensively and at least providing a lift, and he was in there on some key rebounds. He got fouled a couple times. I mean, he was at least in the mix, even though statistically it wasn't one of his better games.
Andy, can we talk about that last play for Indiana? We've lauded the coaching staff, but when it was 65-63, 38.3 seconds left, Archie calls a timeout. And, we saw in some of these situations last year, they would just give the ball to Romeo out top, and he would basically just dribble the shot clock down until there's 7 seconds left and then go. And it didn't work time after time. And so tonight they do that, and Rob gets it down to about 10 seconds, and they do a little ball screen with Trayce Jackson-Davis, and they try and get it into Trayce, which is fine. I really don't have an issue with the set, but I do have an issue with starting at 10 seconds, because if the first option's not there, then you leave yourself no margin for error, as opposed to running something else. I get you want to take some more time off the clock, but I would rather there still be 5 seconds on the clock and we get a good shot as opposed to that. which Rob was kind of in between. Should I shoot it? Should I not? There's not much time left. I don't have anywhere else to go. I just don't understand why we wait so long to get into those sets in crunch time. I thought the coaching staff did a great job, and this is clearly a philosophical thing by them. It's just something that I don't understand.
Yeah, it just felt like at a certain point when the initial read wasn't there, he just needed to take the shot. I think one of you guys mentioned in our text that given the way IU had offensive rebounded, that at least get the ball up on the rim and give yourself a chance to go get it.
For sure. Get fouled, maybe.
Yeah. Maybe something happens there, and I feel like that's a shot that Rob has taken in that scenario. So I think it's just potentially a learning type experience for those guys of, the timing of some of those plays. Because even if you get the ball into Trayce there, he typically is a guy who makes quick moves, but the way he'd had to play for the most part of this game, the way they were really overplaying, you were going to need. It wasn't necessarily going to be you're not catching on the run, going to the basket. You're in true post up. He's going to need a dribble or two to get into something, and you were really under the gun at that point anyway. So I think it's just there was one of the few times I felt like they came out when they really were intent on run something and weren't quite able to do it. The guy was really overplaying Trayce up the lane and kind of pushed him up enough to be able to deflect the ball.
Yeah, and I get it. As Coach Tonsoni says in the chat, the ball went inside. I mean, kind of. I mean, we didn't actually complete the pass. I almost wonder if having Joey in that spot might be a little bit better since he's stronger at holding his post position, although, Trayce is obviously such a threat. And then in terms of taking time off the clock and putting Michigan State in a tough time situation, regardless of outcome, as Coach says, I get that, but the tougher situation is being down 4. And so I would just rather, I guess, get a good shot and leave myself a little margin for error. Maybe I'm wrong. I'm not a coach, but to me, that just makes a little bit more sense.
I think that it was very much a situation where they were like, we're going to our best player. We're going to give the ball to our best player, which is Trayce. And we're going to figure out a way to get it in there. I agree with you. They maybe waited 3 seconds too long to initiate the set. But it's probably one of those things where it's, hey, with 11 seconds left, we go. Probably should have been about 14 or whatever, the difference was. That said, I mean, they almost got it to where they wanted to go. It wasn't like the set didn't work. I think that Rob, maybe his angle in the pass wasn't as good as he wanted to be. So that's why he hesitated a little bit. Then he just fired the pass. Again, I think that I said it in our chat. He probably should have just shot it at that point because he did kind of bounce and delay a little bit. It's like, hey, put it up on the rim, see what happens. There are, obviously I use a great rebounding team. Go up and try and get the ball, maybe get fouled, whatever. But I think that maybe somebody gets a hand on it, tips it out, whatever happens. I think you got to get a shot up there. Obviously, they got what they wanted out of the set, which was an isolation on TJD, and they need to get the ball in, and it just didn't work out.
Yeah, like Jay said, it wasn't there, and that's just where I go. It'd be nice to have a little more time to be able to move on to something else.
I agree with you. I think maybe three seconds earlier on that set and run it and leave yourself another option, and whether that's a jump shot or what, leave yourself another option on the out.
I wish we could pull a fourth video in here of Archie Miller and see his face watching us debate this.
There'd be a lot of head shaking and throwing things. Also a lot of gum chewing. There would be a lot of gum chewing. I think
the smirk on his face would be funny, but hey, it's okay. It was a good set, but let's just start it a little bit earlier. Any other storylines from this game, guys? You look at the KenPom numbers.
Where's
Indiana?
KenPom?
Indiana is now 39th, so they just kind of are inching their way back up. They hit a low of, how low did they get? They were 44th prior to the Ohio State game, which was the lowest they've been. And then obviously beat Ohio State, lost to Rutgers, beat Nebraska, beat Michigan State. So they, you win a home game by 4 points, you're not going to jump a ton, but the defense is now in the top 30 in the country while the offense is 59th. So
honestly, I think that's pretty good for where the offense could be. You know what I mean?
I think that's kind of what we projected preseason. Yeah. We said, it's probably a top 30 defense, a chance to be top 20. They're trending in that direction. And, I think we all knew that the gaudy offensive numbers from November were not going to continue once we got into Big Ten play, which has been true. But they're finding ways to score when they need it, and they're finding ways to get the ball inside in tough matchups, and that's what they have to do. So we look ahead to Sunday. Indiana will face the Maryland Terrapins, a team that is, where's Maryland right now? They are ranked 10th in the country in KenPom, the Maryland Terrapins. They are 15-4. but all 4 of their losses have come on the road. They did end up beating Northwestern by 11 recently, but they were down for a lot of that game. Obviously, a lot of talent.
Imagine being down to Northwestern. Yeah. Come on.
Yeah.
Wait, who does that?
Who does that? So a lot of talent for this Maryland team. I kind of thought all along, Andy, I had kind of a sneaking suspicion that if Indiana could win this game against Michigan State, that I was going to feel real confident about their chances to beat Maryland. Number one, because Maryland's not very good on the road. And number two, you're like, the team's starting to build a little momentum now. When fans go out and they go to a home game and they get riled up and they're excited, and then you win it, it builds momentum for the next one. So I expect with the students back, there to be a lot of excitement for this game. This Maryland team hasn't really been one that's handled situations like that very well. And so if we get the kind of toughness and overall execution that we got tonight, this is, Indiana will beat Maryland. Obviously, they've got to do that, but I'm feeling good about it, at least right now.
Yeah, as you said, they've really struggled away from home. So that is the thing.
In the Big Ten, that
you like. So they've really not played well away from home. So that helps. I think they've got a few guys that aren't shooting it as well from 3-point range as was expected of them earlier in the season. And I think Rob's health, people talked about him limping a little bit, might have banged knees with somebody, becomes really important with Anthony Cowan coming in. And the way that they're going to be able to spread people out. And you really need to see IU. It's another game where you've got a team coming in that doesn't play a ton of big guys, really outside of Jalen Smith, don't play anybody taller than 6'7", maybe 6'8" in there, except for the 7'2" freshman guy. But, I think there's an opportunity if you really are adamant about getting the ball inside as they were at times during tonight's game. That's an advantage that you really have to find. We talked about that in the Nebraska game where you're playing a team with that many wing players. If you're not able to use what is clearly your advantage in that game, you're putting yourself in a little bit of trouble just in terms of the way that they can spread you out. So that's really, to me, the thing to look for. But I also think if you can get off to a good start again, similar to what you did today, Maryland gets a little bit of the here we go again away from home type things, and maybe that puts you in a good spot. But that was motivation should not be an issue given how poorly IU played in the first matchup with them. I think you would like to think that from a toughness standpoint, as Ryan mentioned earlier, that you've started to see more of that from this team, and this coming back and playing well against a team that really embarrassed you the first time around would be another step in the way of toughness for this team. So I'm curious to see how they come out and play. Seem to really need to just be able to great win against Michigan State. You got to put that behind you. Now you've got another chance to beat one of the top teams in the Big Ten at home, protect your home court before you hit the road a little bit and go from there.
By the way, I know I've mentioned the Ken Pom player similarity rating before at times. I'm never going to use it again because I'm looking at Anthony Cowan's player comps. They've got Yogi Ferrell 2016, Yogi Ferrell 2015, Shabazz Napier 2014, Sharon Collins 2010. Anthony Cowan is a good player. He's been a really good player for 4 years. He is not on the level of Yogi Ferrell, and I do not want to see that, or Shabazz Napier, who led his team to an NCAA title. Your system is broken, Ken, and if I ever use that again, just remind me, Anthony Cowan. Yogi Ferrell is so much better than Anthony Cowan. His effective field goal percentage is 45%. Please.
Ooh.
I'm sorry.
Well, I got one more thing because you guys know I'm working. I've got to get out of here, but I want to say I'm going to have an article on this game tomorrow morning for the Big Lead. So Jerod, I'm sure will retweet and send that out, but from the Assembly Call account. But yeah, I'll have an article on this game so you can read my in-depth thoughts that you just heard.
Will it be all Race Thompson or just a little bit Race Thompson?
It's gonna be mostly Race Thompson. I'm kind of like a jazz musician. I kind of mix. I don't know where I'm going once I start. So, but no, there'll be a Race Thompson mention in there. Why not?
He had 2 blocks and 2 steals in 11 minutes. That's
4
disruptive
rebounds.
Defending. I mean, that
was it. 4 rebounds and 4 points.
God,
and one of those rebounds. By the way, he got 4 rebounds, and 2 of them he tipped to his teammates. Or no, one he tipped to a teammate. The other one he stole the ball back from Michigan State. That guy's a ball of energy. We got to find ways to get him.
He has this. His block percentage is 6.3%. His steal percentage is 2.4%. And his defensive rebounding percentage is 24.3%. 12% offensive rebounding percentage. All of those numbers, again, if you're not familiar with advanced analytics, those are all great numbers. Now, it's in limited sample size, but those are elite level numbers when he's in the game. And you saw it tonight. That was elite level defense, toughness, glue guy type stuff that he can do. We just got to keep him healthy, man.
Yeah, Archie
He is
talked
a
about him
major
after the
building
game.
block for this program if he can stay healthy.
Yeah, Archie said after the game, basically it was a back injury. It stiffened up, and they're, just going to monitor him, see. That don't really have any idea of if he'll miss other time or not, but did say it was the best game he'd had as a collegian in his in what he did tonight in 11 minutes. So
I agree.
I think we would all agree with that wholeheartedly.
All right, I just looked at Ken Palm again, and now we're 31st on defense. Ken, your site's broken. Fix it, because we're not going to use it anymore.
He can't keep games from happening, Jerod. That can't happen.
I know. All right, you are listening to the Assembly Call IU postgame show. Remember that because you are an Assembly Call listener, you get 20% off your entire order at homefieldapparel.com with the promo code Assembly20. So if you want a great deal on the most comfortable and unique IU apparel that you will find anywhere, go to homefieldapparel.com, use the promo code Assembly20, and you will get 20% off your entire order. All right, guys, time for last call. It's always fun to linger on a big win over Michigan State, but we do need to close up the show now. So final thoughts, Ryan, why don't you go first?
Just a big win for Indiana, biggest of the year, I'd say. I think before this it was Florida State. I think this is the biggest of the year because of what it means in the Big Ten. Obviously getting a huge win over Michigan State, 3 in a row against Michigan State, when for years couldn't beat them. I thought this team, as we led with, I thought they won with toughness tonight, and they won with heart and hustle and all the things you want to see from your team. And it's not perfect. There's still things they got to work on, but to win this game when you only make half your free throws, to win this game when the other team's shooting, it shoots 43% from 3 and hits a bunch in the row to start the second half, and to just absolutely, Jerod just said something really funny in the chat. Just when you have the ability to take punches from another team, a good team like Michigan State, and remain tough and focused and come back. And when Michigan State took the lead on a 3-pointer and Indiana was down, I mean, they could have gone one of two ways. They could have just wilted there. And early in the season, we've seen them wilt against tough teams. They didn't do that. They fought back. They took the lead back. They held it. They battled through a couple ties and lead changes and everything, but they kept battling back, and they finally just outlasted Michigan State and played smart basketball down the stretch and forced Michigan State in some tough shots and tough situations. This team starts with defense and will win with defense, but it was nice to see them finally start getting what they want on offense and really push that. And as I said to open the show, they really started to take on what Joey Brunk does every single game, and that's fight and battle and not give up and show that toughness and that mentality of just never quitting. This team showed it tonight, and you want them to start making this a habit.
Andy, before you go real quick, this is Thursday, and so a lot of times we end with a mailbag question, and we do have a submission here that I just saw come in from Twitter. From our buddy Jay. So let's cue the music.
It's not that good, but it's not that bad. It's Jay's mediocre question.
So let's see. Okay, number one, did Jay apologize for the Al Durham stuff? Well, we'll get to that. But he said the mediocre question of the week is, how much crap does he deserve for saying that Joey Brunk is a rich man's Tim Priller? I'd say
goodness.
Pretty fair amount.
That's a dump truck of manure is what you deserve.
Pretty how rich is the man is really the question that you have to ask yourself. Yeah. So perhaps,
Yeah, if it's like a Jeff Bezos's Tim Priller. Like the Tim Priller that had that 5-minute stretch against Purdue where he scored like 6 points and had 5 rebounds.
No,
76 screens.
Stop. On that, I'm out of here. Goodbye.
Oh man, we love Tim Priller on the show.
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, thanks for that. Andy, you're let's go. Well, Ryan really did just leave.
What are you gonna? Yeah,
wow. Maybe that wasn't such a mediocre question after all. Maybe that's
keep sending him in, Jay. If it gets him to log off, I mean,
keep him coming.
Yeah, do what you got to do. Just anyway, from a last call standpoint for me, I do really feel like we're starting to learn a bit more about this team, and people are starting to settle into to roles. We talked about this a few times tonight, but those 6 guys of Armaan, Rob, Al in the backcourt, and Trayce, Joey, and Justin up front have really been the 6 that have closed out a lot of these games lately. And so you're starting to get a better feel that one, there are players that Archie is actually comfortable with in crunch time. 2, who those guys are, and 3, they're delivering. As I said tonight, it was a really tight game where every possession was important down the stretch, and IU scored on a whole lot more than they didn't. Could have made it maybe less interesting by hitting more of their free throws, but it does feel like they're starting to build some continuity. It does feel like you're starting to have more guys that you have a better idea of what you can expect from them on a night in and night out basis, which is something everybody's been clamoring for quite a while at this point. So I just think it seems to be a positive development. If you can bring other guys along to potentially, even if they're not in the crunch time lineups, but really add to the mix of guys that you can bring in, carve out specific roles for them. I think Race was on his way to that tonight. We've talked about the injury stuff with him a lot, but I thought he was just super active and the kind of bench guy that can really come in and change a game, or at least keep going the momentum or build that momentum. I thought that's what he did tonight. It was the starters had gotten IU off to a really good start, and he improved upon that with the way that he played. We've seen signs from Jerome, as we talked about earlier. He didn't necessarily do that tonight, short of making the couple free throws at the end and grabbing that rebound. But if you can continue to bring those guys along and get more from them, and maybe expand those 6 guys to 7 or 8 that you feel really good about on a night in and night out basis, I think that's progress. So that's really what I look forward to going into the Michigan or into the Maryland game, because that's a game that a guy like Jerome could be more impactful in, given the personnel that Maryland has, lineups that IU might have to play, and some of the opportunities that he could potentially get there. So he's one to see if he can bounce back. And otherwise, I just thought a really good team win, not just because everybody got got their name in the scoring column, but because guys really stepped in and contributed and made big plays down the stretch. So in this year in the Big Ten, holding serve at home, no matter who it's against, becomes really important. And IU's been able to do that so far. Certainly hope they can do it again come Sunday afternoon. But a really solid performance from IU. Did some good things defensively, and as we mentioned, I thought it was a good game for the coaching staff. So a fun game to watch all around. Certainly more fun given the outcome.
For sure. It wasn't just a great team win. I thought it was a great program win. Hat tip to everybody who was in the building. I love the shots of Assembly Hall before a big game when it's packed before tip-off and you can tell that it's loud and it just looks like the crowd is just closing in on the court. I'm not sure, Andy, you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I don't think there's another arena that looks as intimidating on TV, like with some of the shots that you get of Assembly Hall, some of those high-angle shots. And we know what it's like for the guys who are in there, but it's just, it just gives me chills, those moments before big games. And, the students, all the fans really brought it, and it was a huge part of Indiana getting out to that big lead, and that was important. You saw in the Rutgers game when Indiana fell down early, you can battle back and you battle back, but sometimes it feels like you never quite get over the hump, when you get down early. Now, this game, Michigan State actually did get back in the lead, but still, that stretch that Indiana had at the beginning, and it was, driven so much by the energy that they were getting from the building, that's when Assembly Hall just gives you so much. And, you look back at how things felt after that Northwestern win, where it was a win, but you felt like things were kind of slipping after back-to-back losses to Arkansas and Maryland, and the wins over Connecticut, Nebraska, and Notre Dame, that they were wins, but you didn't feel great about them. It's like, what do we really have here when the schedule gets tougher? And Indiana went out and beat an Ohio State team that is admittedly struggling, but took care of business. They played better on the road, at least against Rutgers, and then they played even better against Nebraska to win one, and now come back here at home to beat Michigan State. Again, it's not meteoric growth. It's not huge jumps from game to game, but it does feel like this team is making some steady growth and really starting to play up to its capabilities. And that's all we ask for. Maximize what you're capable of. This team has some clear deficiencies, but it's also got some stuff that it does really well. It can play inside. It's in the top. It's number 21 in offensive rebounding percentage, number 12 in defensive rebounding percentage. Play to those strengths and make other teams uncomfortable. And Indiana's starting to do that more. It's always fun to watch Indiana basketball, but it's so much more fun to watch them when they're playing like this. So I agree, Andy. Kudos to the players, kudos to the coaches, kudos to everybody who was in the arena. It takes the full program to beat top 10 teams and to beat programs on the level of Michigan State. And for all the things that Archie Miller hasn't done in his first 3 seasons, that's 2 straight seasons of not losing to Michigan State, 3 straight wins over a team that, we've beaten them at home some, but it really feels like a program that's had our number for a long time. And Archie Miller has, kind of turned that around. Now the key, of course, is to do better in the other games. But against that measuring stick of Michigan State, Archie Miller and the Hoosiers have been up for the challenge, and they were again tonight, which was great to see. And now hopefully they'll be up to the challenge again on Sunday. All right, that will do it for us. On this edition of the Assembly Call IU postgame show. If you want to see us do the show live and be part of the live chat, make sure that you subscribe to our YouTube channel, youtube.com/assemblycall. And don't forget to go to assemblycall.com or text IU to 66866 to join our free email newsletter. Special thanks to our longtime listener, Bob Thompson, who produces a lot of the music that you hear on the show, including that mediocre song. And thank you for listening. We'll be back to talk IU hoops again with you on Sunday after IU Maryland. Until then,
take it from me, Freddie Mac Swain Jr. Keep your elbows in, your eyes on the rim, and man, go up and dunk the ball. Go Hoosiers.
Thank everybody for coming out.
All right, I got to get out of here, folks. Thank you.
Here I come. This is Stunt Sony.
Still funny. Still funny. Good stuff, man. Thanks everybody for being here. I think we got over 500 live for the YouTube show tonight. Cool. Pretty incredible. Pretty
good
incredible. Deal. So you're out Sunday. I think it's just me and Ryan.
I'm out Sunday. Yeah. Mallory's got a game at the exact same time. So
okay. Well, go. Try not to get ejected.
I'll do my best. All
right, everybody. Have a good night, man. And we'll see you guys all on Sunday.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, everybody.
See you.